Hello everyone, I'm Mirabel. Welcome to my channel or back to my channel, and today I will tell you about everything I read so far in 2025. I started the year by reading Blood Over Bright Haven by Emil Wang. I did like it. I thought I liked it a lot. Right after reading, I ended up giving it a 4.25 stars out of 5. But after thinking about it a little bit, or better said, not really thinking about the book after finishing it, I rounded it down to 4. It was very solid read, really good, interesting magic system, albeit maybe not as interesting to me as to some other people. I think it was a little bit too limited, I would say, but I understand it was a standalone and that was sufficient, and it was closely tied to the plot. The main character, Siona, wasn't the most likable person, but I was fine with it. I wasn't absolutely rooting for her. She was my favorite character, but she was fine as the main protagonist and the purpose she had in the story. My favorite character was Kara, easily. She was down to earth, no bullshit, F off. Really like her. Tomil was fine. I liked him. I can't say much more without spoiling the whole plot, so if you're interested, definitely go pick this up. So now I'm going to go into a little bit of a spoiler section here, so be aware of that. To me, this book and the biggest takeaway is a parallel that was probably really not intended. I understand the points it was intended to convey, they are clear, but there's also the hidden level to me. The whole point of the plot is the refusal of accepting the truth. Stop closing your eyes before the truth and face it head on. Accept it, whatever reaction you might have. Stop lying to yourself, or stop detaching yourself from your humanity, basically. Dehumanizing some other beings and feeling like the superior being, giving excuses, and just being too comfortable to be bothered to think about it, really not willing to change your life and facing something that is inconvenient, so we're not gonna bother with it. Please take it with a grain of salt. It totally can be a parallel to also humans versus animals, non-human animals, and yes, I mean mostly animal agriculture and the usage of animal bodies for food and clothing and stuff like this, because I don't support that. I already don't eat these kind of things for years. That is definitely a reaction a lot of people have when faced with the truth, with really knowing what's going on. Yeah, we don't go and hunt the food ourselves. It's all packed up in neat packages, and this is truly striking in this book for me, because that is definitely how people react. They absolutely refuse to accept the truth, the inconvenience it could bring to them, even though it is really the matter of life and death for the other being, but they choose the comfortability and convenience and not wanting to change anything. That is definitely something that struck me. That's very good and very sad, kind of depressing, so let's not talk about it anymore. Let's move on. I did read more of Red Rising and continued with Golden Sun. I have to say, thankfully, this was a huge improvement from the first book, which was very Hunger Game-esque. This was something of its own. It was political ambition, the start of a faction war, intrigue, and there were some plot reveals. I think they were interesting enough. I would give this book 4.25. I did have still some issues with it. One of the things is to me, kind of funny how the main characters sometimes, a little bit too often, are using these Latin phrases before fight, for example, mostly. And most of the times, also another character standing next to them just conveniently translates it immediately into English, which is literally just talking to the reader, and that personally for me just brings me out of the immersion in the story. So maybe less of that. Also, the more it is used, and it was used quite a bit, the less impact it has. If it's used less and it's not constantly translated through dialogue, then it will be better. I know the main character, Taro, and several obviously is a darling to the community. I don't know about Mustang, but with the second book, I think She was fine in the first book, I liked her. But with the second book, I just couldn't help kind of disliking her, thinking she's a little bit of a Mary Sue. And I just hope that is gonna go away, fade away. She will get a huge character development, anything on top of what's happening, because I don't think there's much, and she annoyed me just a little bit. I definitely think Victra was much more interesting, and I hope we will see characters, more of them. I will definitely keep reading. I did end up reading J.R.R. Tolkien as I wanted, so I started with The Hobbit. I do not have this bias, nostalgia, as many people do, because they read it in their childhood. I didn't, so I think it was fine, but it wasn't mind-blowing and there wasn't the sentimental value to me, so I gave it 4 stars. The Fellowship of the Ring was really good. I loved the start, the coziness, the description of the Shire, and some more information about hobbits and their history. However, there was definitely a lot of wandering about, finding our way, getting lost in the forest like multiple times, and I was fine with it, but then it hit a point when it was already a little bit too much, and I was happy when that big section of it already ended. That's why I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. The second book, Two Towers, is my favorite out of the trilogy. What can I say? Rohan. That's all I'm gonna say. And I just really like Rohan. That's my favorite part of Middle-earth. And I'm also excited for the second part of the story. I gave this one 5 stars. Of course, I read The Return of the King as well. That was a 5 stars. I wasn't sure because the second book is my favorite. However, the fights and even Frodo and Sam parts I still liked. And the ending still got me. It got me so many times. I honestly never read the books before. This was my first time, but I've seen the movies many times, and the ending still gets me, and this ending also got me. I did switch between a little bit of audio, and I heard the ending as an audio, and it just wrecked me. So that's great. Great story, great ending, sad ending. 5 stars. I'm excited to say I read the first book out of the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy by Cixin Liu. That is The Three-Body Problem. I did not see the TV series. I want to read the books first, and then I will definitely watch it as well. I ended up giving it the 5 stars because I really enjoyed it. I loved it. It was really good. I think it was strong up to the very end. Like all of the book I loved, every part. For some people maybe they were slow parts, but honestly I loved it. I really don't know much about Chinese culture and history, so getting that little peek into the history and revolution and the turmoil that happened there was really interesting. And I absolutely loved this mystery, the looming presence that is absolutely horrifying and unexplainable. That was amazing. Loved it, and I hope it's gonna be like that in the next book as well. The weakest part of the book was definitely the ending, when multiple things got explained a lot, and I personally didn't really want or need that. I was almost disappointed it already got explained to that extent, but I do understand the reason for it, to feed the readers some information so they will be satisfied enough to read more. For me, I could have done without, but I'm absolutely excited to read more. I will definitely read the whole trilogy this year. I would recommend it to sci-fi fans for sure. I managed to finish a series, which is the Children of trilogy, and it was Children of Memory. I do know the author is intending to continue writing more of these books, but for now, let's say I finished the series so I can feel good about myself. This book was definitely different than the first two. The second book was very similar in structure to the first book, but this one was totally different. I did like some parts of it, knowing more about this one alien form. I will not be saying specifically which one, because that's spoiler for the second and third book, but ultimately I think it was maybe a little bit longer than it needed to be for what it was in the end. Some thoughts and ideas at the very end were interesting, but most of the book weren't as interesting. It was good, however, to me the reveal and ending was not satisfying fully. The big plot reveal was one of the options I did think about, so it wasn't surprising. Let me know what you think about this one. There's some people who love this one the most and a lot of people who dislike this one. I think it was fine. I gave it 4 stars. However, I'm kinda sad that still nothing compares to The Children of Time, the first book, which I absolutely loved. And we will see what else the author will come up with. I also ended up reading some literary fiction, and that is Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. Yes, I read this book and I actually liked it. I just somehow enjoyed reading it. I wanted to keep reading. Yes, the very ending was a little bit absurd and bizarre, but most of the book was not as much. There were obvious and repeated points the book wanted to make, and I got them. Message received. Main point was feeling alienated from the society, not wanting to fit in, wanting to do your own thing. The society's absolute refusal of that, of something different, and accepting that. There were definitely a lot really messed up things happening. You think absolutely the worst thing is right at the beginning, but then it somehow gets worse and worse. I will list all the trigger warnings here on the screen, but I do consider them kind of spoilers for sure, so only read them if you really need to check the trigger warnings. I want to do a spoiler section as well, so don't watch this if you want to read it for yourself. Sometimes it does feel like we are all supposed to live one life from a template. Everything is in their little neat boxes. So this is a point that was made in the book. The character was describing it really without emotions, just how she sees it. The whole book was very hyperbole. It wasn't subtle at all. And one of the most absurd conversations in the whole book was about the main character not being intimate with her partner and not wanting or trying to make a child. Parents-in-law, what they said, that was absolutely absurd. It is none of your business. It is not your life, and that's the end of it. Don't push your expectations on other people. I will read some quotes actually, straight up from the book. I hate people who insist on their rights while neglecting their duty. If you don't fulfill your duty as a wife, you'll be causing problems to us. Another really uncomfortable thing is the main character ends up being a victim of a sexual assault by a predator. After finally opening to some people, she faces first with denial and then also with victim blaming as well. The verbal and physical abuse from the family was awful. So yes, the ending might have been bizarre, went full on crazy with the cannibalism and almost alien-like savage behavior of the characters. However, there are many topics which I thought are really important to talk about, so feel free to pick up this book. I ended up giving 4.25 because I did like it. I also read this shorter book, Walk in Practice by Do Kim-in. This is about a true alien wearing a human face. I like this book. I like aliens, but also there is a point it does make. It was translated from Korean. From what I read, it was good translation. Of course, I didn't read the original, but that's the impression I got from this book. Definitely supposed to be parallel to queer people and how they feel like aliens and outsiders. There's also some discussion or points being made about gender and how we see that. Don't read it if you don't like graphic S scenes, even though that's not like the focus and it's not that detailed, but it is there definitely. The alien is involved in hookup culture in Korea. The one thing that is definitely an issue is the fat phobia, which is definitely ironic considering this should be pointing to the lack of acceptance of some differences, of letting people live their lives and not being judged, and that is definitely not nice. There was also literally no point to that at all. But it was a good read. I liked it. I read it pretty fast and I gave it 4 stars. For the last book I read, that is Jack Vance and the Tales of the Dying Earth. Oh boy. I did start reading this book at the end of last year, so it has taken me a long time to read through. I did put it as a passive read, so I didn't read it actively day by day. I also listened to a little bit of audio because it was hard to get through. The first part is probably my favorite. It definitely feels like these short stories, mostly different characters, and it was fine. However, after that, it got a little bit slower for me. I wasn't so eager to continue. One of my main issues with this is the writing itself. I know some people absolutely love it, and to me it was very hard to read. I do appreciate it to some extent. I know now this author is not for me and I will not be reading more from him. Another thing is definitely the second and third part. There is one main character named Hugo. So I was excited there's gonna be one character and overarching story, not just some random short stories. And then I was very not happy about that because he is supposed to be anti-hero. He's not supposed to be likable. But I think to me he was so unlikable that it was not enjoyable to hear about him. I didn't want to know. I kinda hated him. He's absolutely arrogant and disregarding to anyone else. He doesn't care about hurting other people, doesn't care what happens to them at all, doesn't care about selling someone to slavery. Just overall absolute walking garbage. I just didn't care, and if you like those stories, good for you. The last part was okay, but I was just happy to finally finish it, put it as read and move on from this. It was not for me. Now the last thing and the biggest issue is the sexism. There are a lot of characters and there is literally not one of the female characters that I can even name. They were all like side pieces, like this treasure to be won along with finishing some quest. They didn't play any important part. The treatment of them, especially specifically by Hugo, was absolutely horrendous. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I thought this is not happening and I'm unwell. If you have issue with that, avoid this one. This is for some, they love it, it's not for me. With the rating, that's hard. At first, nearing the finish, I wanted to give it like 3.5 because I do acknowledge it's such a classic. It was very important and influential. I think I wished for more sci-fi elements. It was definitely mostly for big part fantasy. And then seeing more reviews and critique and accepting my own lack of enjoyment, I think I might settle with only 2 stars out of 5. So I apologize if you like it. Everybody have different tastes. This wasn't mine. Those are all the books I've read so far this year. I am reading more. Right now I am reading Oathbringer. I'm curious what you are reading. Let me know down in the comments what is the latest book you read. What kind of rating did you ended up giving it. I will be happy to see you next time. Thank you for watching and stay bookish.